Section 2 of Chapter 24 talks about the climate and vegetation. Now, we learned all about the basic climates already in the beginning of the year, but this is really special, and you really, really, really need to pay attention to the issue of monsoons. Monsoons dictate some cultural things and business jobs and where people live. It's a big deal, and it really does control their lives. So culture and religion are also affected by this. So what is a monsoon? We hear about this a lot, and we usually hear about it meaning rain, but it's actually a seasonal wind shift. It's not really rain at all. It's when the wind changes and when the wind blows. Now, in southern Asia, their summers are rainy. Make sure you write that down. And their winters are dry. You need to know that for the test. So let's look at the pictures over here. In January, the wind is coming out of the north. So wind out of the north. And in this area, it's from a desert, from the Gobi Desert, and it's really, really dry up here, really dry. And this dry air comes down, and it sucks all the moisture out of this area, dries it up, and it gets really dusty, dries everything up, and it's cool. But these big, huge mountains here, the Himalaya mountains, block pretty much everything. So it just kind of dries it out. So it's a little bit cooler, but it's not cold because the mountains block most of it. But all that air blowing over is dry, and so it slowly, slowly, slowly dries out southern Asia. Now in their summers, over here in July, the wind changes, and the wind now is coming up from the moist ocean. So let's follow that ocean water up. And it's going to come up. So it's going to bring moist ocean air all over the continent. And as that moist ocean air blows up in here, it is bringing rain. Now, we get the rain shadow effect. So let's look down here, the rain shadow. Now, imagine that this little thing down here is India. All the water is warm and nice, and the wind is bringing all this moisture over, and it brings up all of these big clouds right here. And these clouds are heavy, 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 and they run right into the mountains. They run into the Himalaya mountains, and when they get up to a certain elevation, they drop all of their rain, and it rains on the one side of the mountain right in here. And as it rains, it floods, it goes down the main rivers, and then everything is great. And so in the summer, it rains, and to the point of flooding in some areas. I know in certain areas of Vietnam, they actually build their houses on stilts because it does rain so much. So the main concept here is that a monsoon is a seasonal wind shift. In the winter, the wind comes from Central Asia, really dry, really cold, so it dries out the continent. And then in the summer, the air is coming over the oceans, bringing and carrying tons of warm air, and when it drops all this moisture in the mountains, the southern subcontinent gets flooded and gets tons of rain, and it's great for rice farming and stuff like that. But by the time that air reaches over the mountains, it's all dry, and so right behind the mountains you get this really, really dry air. And even in some of the mountains are really dry. So when we look at more pictures later on of the Himalaya mountains, they're going to look really, really dry and rocky. Alright, now another phenomenon that is a little bit different is a cyclone. Now a cyclone is basically like a hurricane in the Pacific Ocean. And yeah, we know about hurricanes, especially if you're a fan of Florida and you have relatives and family out there. We hear about them a lot in our country. Well, cyclones are on the Pacific Ocean, and there's a particular hurricane in the 1970s that actually is going to create the country of Bangladesh. Now, we need to stay tuned for that for Chapter 25, but it's really interesting how a natural disaster will change people's minds and actually start a revolution.